Okay, I have 9 o'clock, so we're going to go ahead and get started. First off, I'd like to thank everyone for getting up early on this Friday morning to join us for this special Board of Education meeting. The first item we have on our agenda tonight, or today, this morning, is our call to order roll call with our flag salute. So would you please stand and do the flag salute? Okay. I pledge allegiance
to the flag
of the
of the
United
United
States
States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Nation under God, indivisible. Okay, all right, thank you. We're going to move on to our next item on the agenda tonight, or this morning, is our adoption of the agenda. And I will make a motion to adopt the agenda as written.
Second.
Okay, we have motion and a second. All those in favor? 7, okay. 7-0. Okay, next up, and real quick, as we, in an effort to try to move this along as best as we can, we do have some, I think 5 people signed up and quite a few comments to read and then some discussion to have. So to move this along, if we could please wait to be recognized before we start speaking, it'll help us to know who is going to be talking. So first up we have is the Citizens Committee presentations before the board with DNEA, and that's with Joel Addis.
Thank you. Good morning, Joel Addis, special education teacher at El Paso Elementary and president of DNEA. This morning, I'd like to convey a statement to you on behalf of the executive board of DNEA. The executive board of DNEA appreciates the school board's decision to approve the local gating criteria committee, the structure, and the committee's process in the early stages of this school year. The executive board continues to support that decision. The Gating Criteria Committee benefits from the diverse viewpoints held by its members, including building and district administration, board members, classroom educators, support personnel, and our local doctors and mental health professionals. We are grateful for the time and commitment these individuals have given to this process. The importance of local data was emphasized at a recent board meeting, and these individuals have used their expertise to look at current local data when determining the mode of learning for our students. Local doctors and mental health professionals have provided guidance on how they see the pandemic impacting the community. School staff members have provided guidance on how this pandemic has impacted learning for students and staff as the school year has progressed. As anyone who has watched or participated in these meetings knows, the decisions are made with great care and consideration after reviewing local data. It is clearly the desire of all members of the committee to support student learning. We know that this is going to be a difficult 3-week period for many families. As members of the DNEA board, many of us are in similar situations. Some of us will be balancing our teaching with our children's learning. All of us, even those who have been teaching remotely before Monday, will be adapting to a new way of teaching our students. It's going to be difficult on so many levels, but we trust the process and expertise that has led the district to this point. As always, DNEA appreciates the standing place we have on board meeting agendas and appreciate the collaborative nature of our work with the district during this unprecedented school year. With respect and appreciation for our continued work, the Executive Board of DNEA, Joel Addis, Mike Phillips, Amy Heiberger, Sherry Rabel, Rebecca Saldivar, Kayla Eldridge, Kara Lazarus, Lisa Ryan, Kathleen O'Brien, Angela Addis, and Shelley Addis. Thank you, and I would now stand, as it were, for any questions.
Thank you, Joel. Were there any questions or comments for Joel? Okay, not seeing any. All right, thank you, Joel.
Thank you.
Okay, next up, we will move on to our patrons, and we do have some signed up. So before we do that, bear with me. I'm going to pull up a script that we need to read first, and then we also have some comments to read after they are finished. So let me get to this. Okay. The Board of Education has a strong desire to hear from its constituents living in Derby Public School boundaries. Please state your name and address, be brief in your remarks, and avoid repeating the views of a previous speaker. I ask that groups with the same special interests appoint a spokesperson. You're given a maximum of 5 minutes to address the board. Comments should refer to the issues and not personalities. The board shall not hear personal complaints concerning any employee or groups of employees of the school district or any person connected with the school district. These concerns should be addressed through administration. Presentations must be in good taste, befitting the occasion and the dignity of the board meeting. The open forum allows for the board to hear public comments, but there should not be expectation on part of the citizen for a response at this time. The board will, however, take your comments under advisement and conduct its business within the confines of board protocol. Okay, so we do have, I think, 4 of 5, I believe, are here. We'll start working on the list, and if we have the other, so first, and just so everyone knows, you will have 5 minutes, and you will be given, Mrs. Mader will have minute cards to show you as you get down, and when your time's up, we will have to cut you off. So please keep it within that 5-minute mark. First up, we have is Kyle Emery.
Mr. Emery.
Yes.
Okay, Kyle, you're free to give your did you hear the beginning part here?
No, I haven't heard anything up till they just let me in. So
Okay. Okay. Well, you're going to have 5 minutes to give your report. You will be given time cue cards from Mrs. Mader. She'll be holding those up as you get down to being out of time. You need to stop it at when her time says time's up, because we will have to cut you off at that point. But you will have 5 full minutes to give it. Since I guess everyone did not get to hear kind of the protocol, I'll reread it one time. We'll make sure everybody's in the room here. So we have Brian, Alan, Kyle, Rick, and is that everybody? Latona, or is Robert coming in?
That's everyone.
Okay. All right, let me reread this real quick, and then once I get done, Kyle, you'll be to go first. So here we go. The Board of Education has a strong desire to hear from its constituents living in Derby Public School boundaries. Please state your name and address, be brief in your remarks, and avoid repeating the views of a previous speaker. I ask that groups of the same special interests appoint a spokesperson. You're given a maximum of 5 minutes to address the board. Comments should refer to issues, not personalities. The board should not hear personal complaints concerning an employee or groups of employees of the school district or any person connected with the school district. Those concerns should be addressed through administration. Presentations must be in good taste, befitting the occasion and the dignity of the board meeting. The open forum allows for the board to hear public comment, but there should not be expectation on part of the citizen for a response at this time. The board will take your comments under advisement and conduct its business within the confines of board protocol. So Kyle, you are up to go first, so please unmute and go ahead and start.
Okay, my name is Kyle Emery. I live at 8719 Wassel Court in Wichita. We're just barely in the district. But we have a kindergartner and three children who are younger than that, the youngest being an infant. And my wife stays home with them, and I'm full-time employed as Sharon Baptist Church's pastor. We have several families in our church that attend Derby schools as well. And one of the key difficulties that I see with shutting down, especially the grade school level, I know that my grade schooler's attendance is attention rather is very limited. He has a very short attention span, and moving him to remote learning, I think, is going to be not just extremely difficult, but it's going to be hard on a lot of families. In our situation, yes, we have a stay-at-home parent, but we've heard from a lot of single moms and dads who are wondering what they're going to do. They've got to find a way to work and make money, but they've also got to school their kids in some way. I know that one of the most important things or a couple of the most important things for kids as they begin their education, especially, is consistency and routine. They need those things, and not having a routine, it's not going to go well for our kindergartner for sure. He loves school. He's been learning a ton, but I'm worried and concerned that at the early stages of his education, where he's just starting to learn those basics, now all of a sudden we're cutting off and going remote learning, and we're doing this on the recommendation of an unelected official, the Sedgwick County Health Officer. And I just think that Derby schools, our grade schools especially, I think our teachers have been doing a great job. I've been really pleased. Titus's teacher has been doing fantastic, but going to full remote, asking a kindergartner to check in every morning and sit down and do lessons while he's got siblings running around the house, that's asking a lot from a little guy. So those are our main concerns. We just wanted to express those to you. I know you all have a difficult position, and these are unexpected times, stuff that we've never dealt with before. So thank you.
Okay, thank you, Kyle, for your comments. And we are going to go to our next speaker, which is Brian Johnson.
Hey guys, thanks for listening to me today. Just a few things. I've lived here in Derby over 30 years. I live at 8710 Webb Road in Derby. Have 4 kids, ages 5, 8, 10, and 14. And so I definitely have a vested interest in this decision to go remote, which I disagree with 100%. So I've had the privilege of working with infectious disease doctors in my career over the past several years. And usually when they're talking to other doctors, they always look to the CDC for guidance as far as recommendations and what they should be telling other doctors. So that's what I'm going to do here today. So no better than our CDC director on a national level. So I'm going to read some of Dr. Redfield's comments on this specific matter, which he made within the past week. So the CDC director, Robert Redfield, said on Thursday that K through 12 schools should remain open because data shows that schools are among the safest places that kids can be from the pandemic, and attempts to close schools are nothing more than an emotional response. Today, there's extensive data that we've gathered over the last 2 to 3 months that confirm that K through 12 schools can operate with face-to-face learning, and they can do it safely and they can do it responsibly, Redfield said. The infections that we've identified in schools, when they've been evaluated, were not acquired in schools. They were actually acquired in the community and in the household. Redfield continued, but it's not inter-school transmission. The truth is, for kids K through 12, one of the safest places they can be, from our perspective, the director of the CDC is saying, is to remain in school. And it's really important that following the data, let's follow the science, making sure we don't make emotional decisions about what to close and what not to close. And Dr. Redfield states, and I'm here to say clearly that the data strongly supports that K through 12 schools as well as institutes of higher learning, really are not where we are having challenges. He added, and it would be counterproductive from my point of view, the director of the CDC, from a public health point of view, just in containing the epidemic. If there was an emotional response to say, let's close the schools, which I believe this is what Derby's doing right now, an emotional response. Over the summer, Redfield said that the threat of suicide, drugs, and the seasonal flu represented a far greater threat to kids than the coronavirus. We all know the survival rate if a kid under 18 gets the virus is almost 100%. Redfield continued, we're seeing sadly far greater suicides now than we are deaths from COVID. Redfield said at the time, we're seeing far greater deaths from drug overdose that are above excess that we have had background than we are seeing the deaths from COVID. So this is why I keep coming back from the overall social being of individuals, he continued, is let's all work together and find out how we can find common ground to get these schools open in a way that people are comfortable and safe. The goal is to get all these kids back into education. Redfield added, I'd like to see the goal being face-to-face education 5 days a week and not remote learning. So, when I look at this situation and I am reading from the director of the CDC, I'm just a little confused what the disconnect is with this board. This decision is on the school board in your shoulders. It's not some committee. You guys might have established a committee for this decision, but this is on your guys' shoulders. And it's sad to see what's going on in Derby Public Schools.
Brian, thank you for your comments. Alan Peters.
Hey, can everybody hear me okay? Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Roger that. Okay. My name is Alan Peterson. I've lived in Derby for over 12 years, 2327 Northwood Lawn. In one course only this year, or this term, excuse me. We previously withdrew both our kids from Derby schools to homeschool them this year because we believe the second wave
Hey, Alan.
imagined would cause interruptions, limitations to our kids' learning.
Is anybody else having trouble hearing Mr. Peterson?
Schools. And here we are.
Yeah, Alan.
Let me read an excerpt from the Return to Learn plan. Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah, you're bad.
Good. Yeah, can you hear me?
That's better.
Hello, test.
Yeah, I think if he turns off his video, we'll be able
I'm
to
bad.
hear
Say again.
you. If you turn off your video, we should be able to hear you better.
Are you guys able to hear me or not?
No.
Okay. Okay. Well, okay. Let's try it real quick. I can get my tech support here to help me out. If you don't mind restoring my time, it'd be great. Okay, is that any better? Can you guys hear me? Are you able to hear me now? Oh, I gotta love technology.
Yeah.
Take it out. Take it out and just speak.
Yeah. I think you might be okay now. You might try it
Can you
again.
hear me? Where's your volume down?
As it falls, to be able to come down here and do that. Yeah, it's all the way up.
Okay. Hello, can you hear me? Okay, we're just running off the laptop here instead. All right, if you're able to hear me, let me continue. Anyway, we had previously withdrew our kids from the school system. Tiana is currently taking one course. That's a summation so far. Let me read you an excerpt from the Return to Learn plan. Derby Public Schools believes all students deserve the opportunity to succeed through progressive and high quality instruction. We are committed to providing exceptional educational experiences for our students while also offering choice for their comfort level. Upon hearing 2 weeks ago that the middle and high school students would be going remote only through Thanksgiving weekend, I immediately contacted the school and left a voicemail for Mr. Steely, her 11th grade principal. Here are some comments from his email on November 12th, and I will also read my replies. I close or some of my reply. Mr. Peterson, I received your voicemail and reached out to Mr. Lynn, and he includes his response. Mr. Lynn's, here's his comments. He says, without more research-based projects, I'm hoping to learn more about drop-in options at tomorrow's faculty meeting. Mr. Seeley had previously referenced that, quote, if the gating committee decides that we are to continue in remote, there is wording in the Return to Learn plan from the district about drop-ins for students. Mr. Hamblin is looking into this option and will have more information if the remote learning is continued, end quote. With the recent move to remote learning, now through K through 12, my daughter is getting cheated out of audio video fundamental class that she really wanted to take this year. It's a hands-on course that even her own teacher says can't be done using their Chromebooks. So if the district isn't willing to accommodate her on campus to utilize the expensive tech tools that we, the taxpayers, pay for, we're going to have to pull her out of the course and try to find some related experience elsewhere. Unfortunately, though, if we do withdraw her, then she can't take future related courses, as this one's a prerequisite. Including across the board with some of our email. Mr. Seeley, thank you for getting back with me. I am very interested in drop-in option for students and hands-on courses. And if that alternative on-site schedule will be comparable in both time and quality of learning. Like I said in my voicemail, we knew and accepted the risk when we chose to allow our daughter to return DHS for courses that appeal to her interests and possible future career prospects. We wanted her to get some practical experience related to the marketing, photography, cinematography fields while she was still in high school to make sure she really does want to pursue those interests at college level and beyond. Tiana was really excited to finally be in Mr. Lynn's class this year since he was the teacher who helped her decide which courses to take and how best to navigate college options. Now she's feeling extremely disappointed, to say the least, that she may not even be in the classroom to gain the experience necessary to put her on the right path. The district needs to stop and take a hard look at how this lunacy is really impacting our children psychologically. I know for a fact that neglect, child abuse, depression, substance abuse, and suicide are all on the rise in a big way. Yet the primary concern is only with cases over a respiratory virus that has almost no significant health impact on kids. The real numbers don't lie. It's over 99% survivable for most people, decreasing to 95% for those who are over 70. Life is not without risk. The virus is not going away regardless of how long we try to hide from it. It's going to be with us forever. We must come to terms with that fact and get on with our lives. The magical vaccine, which I don't trust for a whole number of reasons, is not really a vaccine at all, like a flu shot. And there's already talk that we'll still have to keep doing everything we've been doing, all this unscientific, unproven nonsense. Anyway, once again, my desire is to have my junior in school on campus for the course that DHS said that they could teach her in person. The Thanksgiving, or we're going to continue to get our hopes dashed over and over. I need to know so we can make other arrangements. Let's not waste each other's time. I never thought I'd see the day that Americans would be so afraid of dying that they would choose to stop living. So sad, respectfully. So that was basically the conclusion of my email response to him. And my point is simple. You guys said that she could enroll in person. We accepted that risk. She did. And now we're kind of stuck where she's got a class that she's really stoked
Okay,
about,
Alan.
and now she can't take effectively
Alan.
without them having to dumb the whole thing down.
Thanks,
and
Alan.
Just give her busy work, and we're not on board with
Okay.
that. So, anyway,
All right.
I need to know,
Can you hear me, Alan?
what's the deal with the drop-ins? Because I couldn't find anything on the district website about it. And so
Latona,
I'd
I don't know
like
if
to
you can hear me.
from the board, that's an option that can be considered. Smaller class sizes, maybe. I don't know, breaking the class up or whatever, spacing them out, but you should be allowed to go.
Can everybody else hear me?
Use the equipment
Yeah,
that
we can hear you.
taxpayers
Alan.
We can't hear you,
pay
so
for
just
correct?
Latona, you have to
And if
cut it, I think.
not, I need to know that too. And don't keep jerking us around.
Latona, are you still on?
So, and we'll pull
I'm
the-
on. I muted him, but it's still going.
Appreciate
Can you-
your time. I'll stand for any questions.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, thanks, Alan. We're gonna go to the next speaker. Okay, next up we have Rick
All right,
Coleman.
thank you. I'll mute this here.
Rick Coleman, 1003
Yes,
East Madison
good.
Avenue, Derby, Kansas. I feel like this is Groundhog
Andy,
Day.
can you hear me? Or excuse me, Justin, can you hear me?
I'll wait till he finishes. This is reality. This is what the kids do every day. We hear on the Zoom meetings, put your computer down. We don't want to see your ceilings. No, put your computer up. This is what our kids are doing. Okay, I've been to Sedgwick County meetings. I've listened to Dr. Mins. I've read what the CDC has said. Okay, the safest place for our kids is in school. So in the same breath, you say, well, we don't have the subs for the teachers and the teachers. Well, you go remote. How many of our teachers have children of their own that are now expected to teach not only the students in their class, but also to coordinate the teaching and learning of their own students? Okay. The last gating committee, I heard a lot of, well, I feel like our staff is in the red and I feel like this is happening. It's the same with Dr. Mins. Dr. Mins, well, I can't quantify that the spread of the virus is from schools, or I can't quantify it's coming from families. Well, that's what these people's jobs are. So if our own experts don't know what they're doing and don't understand what they're doing, and yet we have guidance from the CDC that clearly says, as Mr. Johnson said, keep K through 12 schools open. The school district has one positive case, and on average, they send out 14 to 20 students in quarantine and quarantine healthy kids off of one positive case. I asked the question, how many of those ever come out positive? Nobody has the answer. We need to look at facts, not feelings. Okay. Then you say, well, we don't have enough subs to cover the teachers. That's why we need to close schools down. Well, where are you going to get subs for the teachers that now have to teach their own kids? Is that less important than teaching their class? And yet it's not safe for the staff. You're saying it's not safe for the staff to be in school. It's not necessarily the kids, but yet you're going to pull 60 people from the bus barn and have them pack up your admin center, and that's safe? We're going to send hundreds of kids, literally hundreds of kids, on several buses on Saturday, tomorrow, from the high school for a 3.5-hour bus ride to Olathe. No social distancing, but that's safe. But it's not safe for my kid to sit in class 6 feet away from her fellow student with a mask on. You've proven that you can shut down one single school for positive test case races. So let's do that. Let's look at, why do we have 2 and 3 different charts for the same data just to manipulate it? to show what you want to show. If a school is green, have that school in person. If you have, and you've done it, because sixth grade this year sent home almost half of their students from Derby Middle School. The kids aren't getting sick. You said you had 70 some staff in quarantine, but how many of those were actually sick people? We have to stop quarantining healthy people. 89% of the people that have tested positive for COVID say they religiously wear their mask. 3% are anti-maskers. So masks aren't working. Lockdowns aren't working. Where's the spread coming from? And then someone says, well, I feel like, people aren't going to adhere to the guidance and they're going to go spend time with their family for Thanksgiving. Yeah, they are. But I couldn't go spend time with my wife's grandma because she lives in Oklahoma, because when she comes back to go to work, she has to quarantine for 14 days. This is where we're at as a society. Okay. I need you to look at facts, not feelings, and make a quantitative, hypothetical. This is what our kids are going to be for the rest of their lives based off of this year of learning. They can't make up for it. I have a sixth grader who in fourth grade scored perfect on his state assessment, who begged me to go remote this year and says he hates it because he's not learning.
Okay. All right, Rick, thank you for your comments. Did Robert ever come on the line?
No, sir.
Okay. Thank you, Kyle, Brian, Alan, and Rick for your comments. We will take those into consideration as we move on in this discussion tonight or today. I'm going to move to our comments that we had submitted to be read. I got these last night. I haven't had a chance to fully summarize them, so I'm going to read these comments. I'll try to leave out any personal information that is in these as best as I can. Okay, first comment we have is from Shelby Diedrich, and it is, in regards to fully remote for elementary students and students needing to be on at specific times as if they were in school, what about those parents who work full time? We cannot just stop working to stay home in order to be on Zoom for school. The daycare my child goes to cannot legally for him to do so. He has the ability to be his work, but if he decides not to get on, they cannot make him. Now, he will be considered an unexcused absence and can potentially lead to truancy if that were to continue. Has there been any consideration for these types of situations? Okay, next we have Julie Darling. Her comment is, our kids need to be in school learning. Remote learning doesn't work for elementary students, especially the ones who can't read or who have trouble staying on task. We are all required to be at work, and most of us don't have an option to work remotely. My children cannot be unsupervised at home working remotely while I'm required to be in the office. Our children are suffering as a result of COVID, and remote learning is not an answer for all kids, especially those who both parents work outside of the home. We enrolled our children in public schools to get an education, and we pay for them to be in class, not at home. Otherwise, I would homeschool them myself. Next comment is from Marilyn Dinsmore. My foster son is really struggling being remote and not having access to the teacher for one-on-one questions. I beg you to put these kids back in the classroom. With masks and social distancing, there should not be a problem. Those compromised have the option to go remote anyways. Thank you. Next, we have Courtney Webb. Hi, my son is in an SLC class. He has severe autism, and while he is getting more verbal, he is still classified as nonverbal. His class has been his teacher has been such a blessing to us the last 2.5 years. Prior to this, he was not potty trained, and he had very few words. He is now able to express himself so much more and has truly come out of his shell. When school was canceled in March, he was heartbroken. Children with autism and other special needs truly need the structure that an SLC class provides. Without that structure and without the wonderful teachers and paras, he has regressed so much over the months without school. Not only that, but his aggression increased because as much as I try, I cannot provide the structure and routine that his teachers and paras do. He knows that school is school and home is home and is not able to focus at home on school activities. Online learning is absolutely not an option for us. He can't sit in front of a computer. Please allow the SLC children to be in-person learning. This is so vital to them. He struggles so much not being in school, his speech regresses. His knowledge of the alphabet and numbers and everything else they work so hard to teach him also regresses. There are very few children in these classes and the risk of exposure is slim. I feel that his IEP is not being honored. I'm not minimizing COVID. I'm an ER nurse as well, and I work with it every day. I am well aware of the risk to those who have compromised immune systems, but we also need to consider what is best for kids, especially those with IEPs. Thank you for your time. Okay, next we have a comment from Brandon. The last name got cut off. It says, I don't want to see the smaller elementary schools go remote. My son didn't do well going remote the first time. He was already going through issues with depression even before the pandemic. He's also struggling in school earlier this year, and I think going remote would only make things worse. He's a third grader and already has had issues with wanting to take his own life. Please reconsider going remote for the elementary kids. Next, we have Allison Russell. Please consider the mental well-being for the younger kids. Going remote is not a good option for my preschooler or third grader. Last year, my third grader got depressed and had to start seeing a therapist during the continuous learning. He does not do well learning or working from a computer all day. He gets migraines and very frustrated and discouraged. They need to be around their peers and instructed by a teacher in person. It is also going to be impossible for us working parents to work and monitor / teach our children at the same time. Please keep the normalcy of going to school for our kids. And the last one we have is from Brooke Hutchison, and it says, good afternoon, BOE members and district personnel. I would like to first thank you for how you have handled the pandemic thus far. As a teacher, teaching 1st and 5th grade with social emotional deficits remotely, and a mother with 9 children in the home, spanning 5 different buildings and 3 different school districts, I know firsthand that the task that you've been given is impossible. There simply is not a solution that will please everyone. By your diligence in handling the current situation with care and data every other week, it has given me a sense of security that I have not gotten from other districts. Thank you for keeping safety and education at the forefront. Thank you for holding this special meeting to allow everyone time to voice our concerns and to get prepared for Monday. I have a couple of ideas I would like for you to consider as I'm having to teach my students while trying to manage 9 kids, with one being a rowdy preschooler. What would the results look like if parents in the elementary level took a survey to see who has the necessary setup for children to stay home and how many people do not have the luxury of that? Perhaps those that are able will volunteer to keep their kiddos home. This could lower the numbers in the elementary school, allowing the remaining students to spread out further in the building. On top of this, what would it look like to consider only pre-K through 2nd grade going in person, taking into consideration special situations with 3rd to 5th grade? I believe that 3rd grade and above have favorable odds of being successful online without the help from a parent. Are there certain teachers that are willing to remain in person? Please seek a solution in which my preschooler can still attend in person. Okay, that was all the comments we had, and so I want to thank the speakers and those who submitted comments. It's always good to hear from. What was that?
So Justin, I got a question. Where did those comments come from?
Those were comments that were submitted to Latona or Heather. I'm not sure which one got those comments.
Okay.
And they were sent to all the board members on. The board got them yesterday, I believe. Tona, is that right? Or maybe the day before?
The point I'm trying to make is it seemed a little one-sided when we've gotten tons of emails showing the other side. So
those comments come from a Google survey.
Okay. Oh, from a survey.
So I'd like to, I know, isn't Dr. Mize on the phone?
Dr. Turner?
Or is Dr. Turner one of the doctors on the phone?
Yeah, Matthew, you want to get to the discussion part, or do you want to do it during the patient?
No, go ahead. Just go ahead.
Okay. All right. Okay, so we're going to move from the patrons and presentation for the board. We're going to move on to discussion. First up, we have our discussion item 4A, and it's the gating decision. And really, and Matthew can chime right back in just a second. All I was going to say with this was that, so in the beginning, when we had the committee, when we were setting it up, we did discuss at one point, I think even Dr. Alvarado agreed, if we were to ever move our schools from in person to fully remote, then we as a board would probably want to look at that. And I think most board members, I think, thought that was probably an okay idea. And I think Alvarado did kind of say the same thing. So once that happened, I felt it was in our best interest to maybe get together, discuss this, see what questions we have, open it up to the citizens to comment, because it doesn't seem like there's that many outside patrons that are part of the committee as well. So I thought maybe it would be good to get us together, let us discuss it, let us kind of work through this issue a little bit as a board, since that's kind of what we were elected to do, and then we can move on from there. I do know I'd like to have Nikki and Becky provide update, or at least kind of fill us in again on staff and students, maybe total cases we've had, and then what we currently have active right now. And then I know Matthew did have some comments he wanted to make. So Matthew, you're more than welcome to go ahead and go first, and they can jump in with their.
No, I'd rather hear their data first, and then I'll reserve my comments afterwards. Thank you.
Okay.
Sure.
So Becky, if you want to.
Sure, I can go ahead and start. Thank you. Becky Mader, Assistant Superintendent of Human Resources. Thank you for the opportunity to share a little bit more information. As I shared with the gating committee on Wednesday, I do have concerns regarding our staff and the number of positive cases. We have had 5 new positive cases among staff members come in since that gating meeting and since the dashboard was posted on Wednesday. So that's a little bit of new information that I wanted to share with you this morning. I would like to share my screen with you for just a minute so that you can see our staff gating trends that we look at. This is on the gating document. Can you guys see that there?
Yes.
Okay, awesome. All right, so when we look at the gating criteria, this information is shared with that gating committee. These are our positive cases by week. They're new positive cases for the week, just to be clear about what we are looking at there. So you can see the chart there that kind of shows our trend, and that is where I was coming from when I said that I do feel that we are increasing when it comes to staff cases. When we were looking at that gating criteria, these are the facts and the data that I was looking at to make that statement regarding our staff. So a couple of things just to point out. I think that that data right there, it's clear, it just kind of speaks for itself, but a few things to mention. Last week, 10 of those 14 cases, so if you look at the November 16th through 20th, 10 of those 14 cases were elementary staff members. So we were feeling absolutely an impact from positive staff cases at the elementary level that particular week. When you look at November 23rd through 25th, we have our highest yet, and it is just Friday. So we did post that dashboard on Wednesday, but we look and we have 16 positive cases. 10 of those 16 are also elementary. So this is the information that I was referring to when I said I feel that we're steadily increasing when it comes to staff positives. If you look at the last 2 weeks of gating, the previous 2 weeks, the time the gating met prior to last Wednesday, you would see that we had 17 cases. And then if you look at this 2-week window, we had 30. So that almost doubles the positive cases among our staff members. So that is the staff. I do think it is very important to look at Nikki's data as well and look at the big picture when we're looking at students and staff. And what I shared with the gating committee on Wednesday was specific to staff, and this was the information that I shared. We have had 47 new positive staff cases in the month of November. And then, like I said, 5 since the dashboard was posted on Wednesday. The latest one actually came in this morning. It was an elementary staff member that I was notified of just this morning. So we're trying to keep this as updated as possible. You can see down there below each of the weeks that's broken out, the 79 is the total positive cases since August 31st in our district. So I will take any questions if we have that, or we can come back after we talk about Nikki's information. I'll be here, so happy to try and provide whatever information that I can.
Becky,
Okay.
can you give us the quarantine numbers as well?
Yes, absolutely. Let me share again real quick. Thank you, Robin. All right. So I can just click over to this other chart here. It's on the same document. There we go. Can you guys see the quarantine, staff quarantine each Friday? Okay, so quarantine is a little bit more difficult for us to track. It's very fluid. People go in and out of quarantine for different reasons. For example, if they're having symptoms and they're awaiting test results, they're quarantining. If they get a negative test result, they're back, able to come back to work as long as they've been fever-free for 24 hours. So with positive cases, it's very easy to know we have a new positive case. We can track that. With quarantine, like I said, it's a little bit more fluid. So we do take a snapshot each Friday of how many staff members are in quarantine at that given moment. And so we did a Wednesday snapshot this last week because we had staff reporting Monday, Tuesday, and then we had district level staff working on Wednesday as well. So that November 25th, the 55, is a Wednesday snapshot. The rest of them are Friday snapshots, but you can see there also on that chart the trend for quarantine staff. And there have been some comments about quarantine teachers that are healthy and they're quarantined for being a close contact or for other reasons like that. And that's true. And our staff does have the opportunity to work remotely if possible. If they're able to perform the essential functions of their job and able to continue teaching remotely, they have the option to do that. We also want to be clear that if they're not feeling well or if they have other obligations and family matters to attend to, that there's no pressure or obligation to continue teaching through a quarantine. They are eligible for FFCRA leave, and we work with many staff members on that. But there is an option to continue teaching remotely, and many of our staff do choose to do that. So when you look at the quarantine staff, there's also a lot of scenarios there. Some of them are sick, some of them are not. Some of them are in quarantine to care for a child who's sick with COVID or who has become a close contact with COVID. So there are a lot of factors that play into that. But I do think this is a helpful resource for us to look at when we're making gating type decisions. So thank you, Robin, for asking about that.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Becky. Do have some questions, but I wonder if everybody would like to hear Nikki's update first before we ask them.
No, I think our question's for Becky, so both.
Okay, go ahead, Matthew.
Hey, Tina, you go ahead.
Thank you, Matthew. Becky, the 5 new cases that we've had since Wednesday, those are not reflected in the 16. So now we're at 21.
No, those are reflected. Those are reflected. There's a note. Yes, there's a note at the top. I don't know if you guys could see it when I was projecting. Probably not. I had it scrolled down below it. I apologize. These numbers include positives that come in after the dashboard is updated. So those numbers do include the 5 that came in since the dashboard, but you wouldn't see them on the dashboard that's posted on the district website.
Okay. And then the second question I have is, if a teacher is teaching remote, if they're quarantined and they're able to teach remote and they are teaching remote, but their kids are in a classroom, who's sitting with their kids in the classroom while they're teaching remote?
So that is an excellent question. I'm going to answer it, and then I may also lean on Shannon and Clint to speak to that a little bit about how they are covering those classrooms in their buildings, if they don't mind. That is covered in several ways. Sometimes we do have a substitute in the classroom with the students, and the teacher is teaching remote sections, but maybe not their in-person section. So it's kind of a mix of what that teacher's doing. That teacher's working part-time from their quarantine. We also have some scenarios where we are able to arrange supervision within the building with resources that are already there. For example, building para, or maybe support staff that's already generally in that classroom supervising. And then in those cases, we have to assign a teacher in charge who is, supervising that person who's supervising the class. So it gets a little bit complicated, but I will say that our administrators and our staff have been really creative and really thinking outside the box with how to do that in order to keep as many classrooms with consistent instruction as possible. So Shannon and Clint, if you guys have some things to add in on that, I would love to hear your perspective from the buildings.
Sure. Obviously at the elementary, it's a little bit different than middle school, high school, because elementary are not teaching synchronously. So in order for me to be able to allow a teacher who is at home on quarantine to teach, I cannot have a certified substitute in that position because of auditing purposes, I cannot pay 2 people for the same position on the same day. So the only way that I at the elementary level, or any of us at the elementary level, can cover a teacher on quarantine is with a building para, basically a non-certified teaching position. And I am lucky in this sense that I'm open concept and I have other certified adults in that building that I can assign as a supervisor. The problem is if I pull a building para, I'm pulling them from all of their other duties, and they all play multiple roles throughout the day, from lunch and recess, interventionists, all of that. So I robbed Peter to pay Paul to cover that class to allow the teacher to be able to teach from home. But somebody loses out with every time we have to pull that. But those that are closed concept don't have that luxury of being able to assign a certified person to supervise the non-certified staff member who's sitting with those students.
So we've tried to be creative as well with our with teachers who have remote sections. So a handful of my teachers have 2 periods or so, maybe 1 period that they teach remote, in addition to having a couple staff members who teach remote all day. They have been able at times to go ahead and keep their remote classes. We've gone as far as trying to work out schedules where a quarantine teacher would cover the remote sections of a teacher that's on site, and then that way that teacher could cover the on-site classes for the quarantine teachers. We haven't had to do that very much. I think we did that maybe once or twice. So we've had things where teachers teaching one class remote, and then they go cover the class of the quarantine teachers. So we've had times though where we have hired a sub, and then the quarantine teacher also will remote into the class. That hasn't been super successful. We've tried it though, and like I said, it's different situations. It works differently to different levels of success. But I think our sub fill rate in October was about 68%. And so that put a lot of pressure on other staff members to cover on their planning periods. So yeah, lots of different things, but it's a huge challenge.
Thank you guys for sharing that. I appreciate it. And I will just note too, I feel like the positive cases, they keep coming in. As we're here in this meeting, I have notification that we have another elementary positive case that just came through my email, flashed up on my second screen right now. So we have another staff member, elementary level, who has tested positive. So I mean, I think we all are working hard to cover these things and to work with it. And as you can hear from our principals, they're doing what we can, and we're ready to do whatever we need to do. But the reality is it's facts and data. And this is definitely the highest number of positive cases that we've seen within these windows as we've continued to monitor.
Okay, Becky.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Matthew.
Okay, so I got several questions. I'm going to hit several different people. So Becky, those 5 and now the 6th person that's come in, has there been any contact tracing on, well, of course, the one that just came in, there hasn't been, but on the 5, has there been any contact tracing with other staff members yet that would have put more people in quarantine, or was that reflected in the numbers or not?
So let me look at who they are for a second and see if they would have been people that were working in the building. But I will also let you know that thank you to the COVID coordinator and her team. When we're working with the positive staff, we're working with them on their timelines, when they're able to return, what kind of remote work arrangements they may need. We're working out those logistics to cover in their classroom, and then also working with them on leave. And thankfully, Amy Stedman and her team and Nikki Seeley are working on any contact tracing that needs to occur with those staff members. So I will let Amy speak to that, but I can tell you, just looking at the people that they were, 2 of them were from Cooper. So those staff members have not been in the building, but Amy would go back 2 days prior to when their symptoms started. So it's possible that they could have been in the building. 1 was Derby High School. And I know just from knowing that that person was not working in the building from the time that symptoms were developed. But I will let Amy speak a little bit more closely to that, knowing the process that she works through with that.
So we have had to quarantine teachers because of contact with other educators. It is something that our health department contact tries to stay pretty conservative on because he realizes that schools need teachers. And so he tries really hard to see what we can do and make sure we have really covered all our bases before we have to quarantine teachers off of close contacts of other educators. But with that being said, yes, even within the cases that we've had just recently, we have had staff members, come in contact with other staff members, and we have had to quarantine some off of contact with others. And so it's not something that we are having to do as much now that secondary is remote. That really slowed down a lot, but it is something we're still having to do at all levels.
Yeah, and that was the point I was trying to make. You're talking 5 or 6 people to get that test positive, and then that balloons to 15 or 20 just because of close contacts, and that's the point I was trying to make.
So three of the 6. Oh, I'm sorry. 3 of the 6 taking a second to look at who they are and knowing where they work and what their arrangements may have been. 3 of the 6 work in buildings that are currently in person. So I don't know if those people were not feeling well last week and chose to stay home, or if they've been in the building, but their buildings are in person. So there's definitely a possibility of some close contacts. That was students and staff.
And that was my whole point. It's not just the people that are getting sick, it's the close contacts that's affecting our staff.
Right.
And not having staff members, then that's problems teaching kids in class.
And Mr. Joyce, sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
We've been trying to track the data as far as when positives who are in quarantine, have tested positive based on that quarantine status because of contact with another positive. And so we've tried really hard to keep the data on that. And from what I have, we do have people in quarantine who are testing positive. And, our health department contact continually says that's why the quarantine process is working for us right now at times, is because, they're coming positive because they were in contact. And so, unfortunately that data says that is true. It is a communicable disease.
Yeah. So, all right. Thank you for that information. So the other point I'd like to make about that kind of sums this up, we're not sending people home. Sedgwick County that's sending people home with the data that we provide them. So I know a couple of the patrons that were talking earlier, they were making those comments that we're sending people home, and that's not the case. Now, this is more towards the principals we have online, not a question to answer. Well, I guess it is a question to answer. You said you're pulling resources from inside the school, which means you're pulling reading teachers probably from kids that need that specialized reading deals to cover these classes because you're sending all these people home, and I'm seeing some head nods there saying yes. So by going fully remote, it would almost be like a reset because everybody would be teaching remotely, including the special educators. So all kids would be getting the equal learnings that they're supposed to be doing and the help that they're getting, the extra help they're getting if they have an EIP or I forget what the other one is, the other plan that has going on. But the point I'm trying to make is by going remote during this order from Sedgwick County and by all the data that's been provided, and Heather, after I'm done talking here, you were going to try to get the number of schools that have gone remote. I think that'd be important to hear during this conversation. All kids would be getting equal learning. And with all the hotspots that we're providing, nobody should have an issue getting online. We've been working with everybody on that. I think I still think the gating community probably made a good assumption. I also wanted to thank staff at this moment. I know you guys worked through the Thanksgiving holiday getting ready for this meeting, and it's appreciated. But Heather, if you could provide the schools that have gone remote since all of this has been going on, it would be appreciated.
Sure, happy to do so. First, I would say before I share that, for those on the screen and then those individuals that are viewing this at this time, I am just thankful people care, is what I would say. And this is the season to be thankful, with that. I'm also thankful, and from the people we hear and people on the screen and people viewing, that people value education. I think that's important with that, and that comes across from everyone. And then the other one is, it's always important that people can voice their thoughts and opinions. I think that's an important opportunity for individuals. I would say, despite the varying opinions and things, I do believe that I believe we can agree on that in-person is the best place for most kids to learn. I think that's a commonality that all of us have under normal conditions, is what I would say. And right now, unfortunately, it is not normal. And we know we haven't been living under normal. And right now, we're all hopeful normal will become sooner or later. But right now, we do have to look at that data and see where we're standing and making decisions accordingly. And also taking into account health guidance from both our local doctors, and we do have Dr. Turner on the call, and also with Dr. Min's recommendation, where they said schools, colleges, universities should utilize remote learning as much as possible. That all played into the gating committee and helping guide their decision. With that being said, to answer this question, with that piece that we have currently, we're running secondary remotely. So we do have Derby High School, and this is leading up to it, and Derby Middle School and Derby North. Due to numbers, we are closely watching. We did during that period of time. I felt, looking at the numbers and consulting with our team that closely also monitors that together, that we did need to move, and visiting with the building principal at Cooper Elementary during that period to remote. So based on that, we did have that school move into the remote standing. I will say, going into that, I think that's important to note, we really were watching those numbers and had, you can say that there were elementaries that we were really, really concerned about and kind of on that cusp. And then we continued to have numbers coming in. So our data is increasing, as you can see, taking a look at that. Hope that answers your questions. And again, I am thankful that people care and again, value education.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Heather. I did have a quick question for Becky. Becky, so with the positive cases we've had among the staff, so they're sent home and I guess ones that are teachers not able to teach. My question, I guess, would be, how will that change? So if we're all remote, we wouldn't necessarily ask a person that's sick with COVID to teach remote or in person. So wouldn't we still probably have a staffing issue if we're remote as well? I'm just trying to understand how much staffing savings we would really have if some of the stuff that we're reading in regards to data is that you're probably going to get COVID many places, not necessarily just school, if that's where it's at. If people are getting positives, we won't have them teach even remotely, so we're still going to need subs and all that, right? Am I correct in that?
Yep, we'll definitely still need some subs. We have equipped our subs with laptops and training for remote subbing. We have some subs who've been subbing for our remote teachers currently. And then if we went remote at the middle and high school, we do still have teachers who need time off, and we do have substitutes in those classrooms, and we're ready and equipped for that. And we have, fortunately, some substitutes who prefer to sub remotely. They're not comfortable coming into our buildings, so we have those people that we can rely on to fill substitute positions there. I don't know if I could say with certainty that we won't still have some challenges when it comes to filling all of the positions. I think one way that I can see it helping is that some of our healthy teachers who are quarantining, who aren't able to teach remotely, would now be able to teach remotely. And those would be some positions that would be filled by those teachers. where before we needed a substitute to come into the building to cover that classroom. I don't know that it's going to be going to handle all of the concerns that we have there. I think the greater concern is the number of positive staff cases and the way that it relies back onto that gating chart. You know, I don't know that I'm saying I see these positive cases in staff, we must go remote. I think looking at that and seeing how it pushes us when we look at those numbers and statistics over into the more red category on the gating, that's what I would be looking at. I think that there will be an impact with the teachers who are in quarantine and those who are able to teach remotely, but we'll definitely still have to be working on substitutes and providing training and providing resources and incentives and encouraging our substitutes to stick with us through it. I think that that's really important.
Okay, thank you. So it's basically safe to say we're not sure to what extent, but we would probably still have some staffing constraints to work through, even if we continue with the full remote, as opposed to in person. We just don't know what the extent would be and how much different it would be at this point.
I think it's hard to say with COVID. I mean, we're planning ahead all the time and we're doing so much work and preparation and then ready to shift with whatever we need to do. And I'm confident that we can address it and I'm confident that we can get through it. What it looks like yet, I feel like we're ready for several scenarios, and, you know, setting our subs up with the equipment that they need and the training that they need is that first step. And I'm hopeful that we'll have significantly fewer staffing problems, but we'll still have to keep it at the forefront and keep working on it every day.
Okay, thank you. Any other board members have questions for Becky? I'm trying to flip through the screens here to see if I can see any hands.
Hey, Justin.
Oh, go ahead.
I do.
Andy.
Joel had his hand up too.
And just really quick, I can provide a very personal viewpoint on this. Joel Addis, special education teacher at El Paso Elementary, and I'm currently quarantined. And so I went home last Monday, and of course I was not able to work with my students on Tuesday and was not planning on being able to work with them this upcoming Monday or Tuesday. However, if we were in a remote situation, I would be able to connect with those students and teach them. So it's a very specific example of that. And I have not had subs during that time. What's happened is my paras have been covering the things that have to be covered, but it's kind of one of those situations, as Mrs. Damel said, robbing Peter to pay Paul. So thank you.
Okay. Mr. Watkins, go ahead.
Becky, this question probably is for you. One of the pieces of data that was provided at the gating committee meeting was the absenteeism rate for staff. And so I looked at that a little closer and just trying to understand the differences between kind of what we show for cases and then also the absenteeism rate. So based on a rolling 2-week comparison of teaching staff this year compared to last year, this past 2-week period, so it's November 9th through November 20th, our current year's percentage for teaching staff was 93.54 present, which is actually higher than last year's total of 93.04. And then the 2 weeks prior, it was the same case where our actual percentage of teaching staff present was about 0.5% higher this year as compared to last year. So just trying to sort out, you know, when we look at this data that actually talks about the attendance of, and specifically teaching staff, how that meshes up with your presentation and the cases and understand there's some stresses going on with staff. But again, trying to compare the two pieces of data and make sense of that, if you could elaborate.
Yeah, sure thing. So that staff absenteeism data, I think I shared with the gating committee earlier on that I would feel a lot more comfortable with that data if we could go back years and establish a true baseline to compare that against. But we're doing what we can with what we have. So when you look at those comparisons, that is just from last year and just this year. And like I'd said during gating too, we have staff gone for a lot of different reasons. And I will be honest and say that there have been in the past problems with covering classrooms and not being able to fill them with a sub. And in a normal year, that happens. And our principals can speak to that too. You know, there's times when you have to pull a specialist and you have to cover that classroom. But what's happening this year with the COVID impact on our staff is that this is happening more on the daily, and maybe it's more than one position that needs to be pulled, where maybe you would have pulled one reading specialist, you're pulling 2 or 3. in a given day. And I don't know if I can explain to you why that's happening. Because when I look at our staff absenteeism rates, we didn't spend a lot of time talking about it at the last gating meeting, but we are looking at pockets. It's so fluid and it's hard to grab that snapshot data. You know, with COVID, you send a staff member home to quarantine per the health department's guidelines, and we have less time to try to find a sub to secure for that classroom. We hear someone has symptoms, we need them to go home so that we're trying to slow the spread, and there's less time to plan for that. And I don't know if that's having an impact on it or not. I'm really not sure. But when we look at the absenteeism for our staff, we're looking at a comparison of building to building. So our lowest percentage of teaching staff that was present was at Tanglewood for this last gating meeting. They were in the orange, and then Oaklawn in the yellow. And those were two places where we were starting to see some close contacts identified with positive cases. And those staff members were needing substitutes in the building to cover those classes. So that chart that shows the orange and the yellow is a comparison of our buildings and where are our buildings that are having the greatest impact. The other sheet that goes with that is comparing just last year with just this year. And so when you look at that, we were looking at, you know, upper 80s to 90% of our staff present. I think it's the ways that we're having to try to fill those and the different people that are gone that is having the crunch felt at that building level. So I don't know if I directly answered your question, but that's how I interpret that, and that's how we're using it to make those decisions. And when we were looking at the colors on the gating, we didn't have a huge concern where it came to that. We had a building in orange and a building in yellow. But the reality is that trying to provide the coverage for these classrooms and the quality, consistent instruction for the kids is definitely being impacted. And that, I think, was shared by our building principals, both at the secondary level and the elementary level.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, in that table, as you pointed out, Tanglewood was at 84%. Oaklawn was at 87%. Both were in yellow. And I understand both of those schools have had some challenges. So yeah, wondering if it makes sense to require this across the board for two schools that are flashing warning signs, right? And they are dealing directly with this more when the rest of our district, like I said, as a whole, we're above last year as a percentage of staff present based on the data, like you said, the data that you put together for us. So, okay, thank you.
Okay.
Yep, welcome.
All right. Okay, we got Tina and then Matthew.
So I want to circle back to a question that I asked a while ago about who's covering classes of quarantine teachers, because I've heard now two people say that they're being covered by paras. So I just want to make doubly clear for my own clarification and maybe everybody else's clarification that we're saying non-certified professional educators are covering these classes of people who are being quarantined. And the kids are not having a teacher in the classroom teaching them.
Sure.
Am I understanding this correctly?
So when those circumstances are occurring, the teacher is remoting in to provide the instruction. So they are being taught by their certified teacher in an effort to provide consistency so that they have their teacher providing that instruction. But the teacher might be zooming into the classroom and the para is in the classroom supervising the students, like the boots on the ground for that particular teacher who's zooming in, who can't be walking around the classroom and monitoring students and providing that. They can still provide the one-to-one help for a student, but it's a lot easier to do that when you're present in the classroom. So, and Shannon, I know you were about to say something about that, if you want to add in there.
Yeah, that's basically what I was going to say, that we're only utilizing a para if and when the certified staff member can zoom in to deliver the instruction. We're not pulling a non-certified person to put into a classroom unless the teacher is available to zoom in and teach. So I am pulling other certified teachers to cover classes when I cannot find subs to fill those positions. But paras are only being utilized if the teacher can Zoom in remotely to deliver instruction.
We're not using paras, with the exception of we have 2 paras that are certified subs. And so in very extreme cases, we've employed them as a sub instead of as a para. But that does bite into the services that they would provide as a para. So we use that extremely rarely. On top of that, what we have done is we've combined classes with subs sometimes. So I had a science class, both 8th grade science teachers were out. Both of their classes had been hit pretty hard by quarantine. So we combined them to make one class. It was like, I think 35 or something in there. So pushing the limits there some. Our fill rate in November went up to 86.11. And like I said, in October, it was 68. And so when we talk about staff absenteeism, I think that, again, I think as Becky mentioned, the data is a little bit tough to interpret, largely because we have so few people leaving for professional development right now.
That's a great point. I was going to mention something about that as well. And also, I think, Clint, you can speak to this, but we have staff members who are doing whatever possible to be there, even if they have family needs to take care of or their own things to do. I think we've heard teachers attest to that where in the past they may have felt more comfortable taking a personal time off, or even for their own activities or professional development or whatnot, that they're doing whatever they can to stay because they know the stress that it's placing on their teammates when classes need to be combined or covered by other people. So I know, Clint, you have had that in your building.
Yeah, they definitely are very concerned about, particularly like last minute subs. Unless a teacher personally makes contact and requests a sub, they're just not getting picked up in frontline. And so that puts a lot of pressure on their colleagues to cover their class. And like I said, a lot of it's the teachers, when they're quarantined, they can still teach. And so even when we had people quarantined, we were able to still utilize them to some extent. So that takes a lot of pressure off the system when the quarantine people are still able to work. Just to give you an example of fill rate, the week of November 1st, my fill rate was 76.32%. Then the week of November 8th, it went up to 94%. And then the week of the 15th, it was 100%. And the fills went down. The number of vacancies went down dramatically. I had 40 vacancies the week of the 1st, 24 vacancies the week of the 8th, and then 20 vacancies the week of the 15th.
Okay, Justin?
Yeah, go ahead, Matthew.
So I wanted to tie in with what Becky and Clint were saying about those numbers and that Andy was kind of poking at from last year and this year. With the professional development and conferences, you're not having that this year. Basically, people are just teaching, and the reason they're out, they're sick or quarantined or whatever. Whereas last year, those numbers aren't split out, so it would probably be a lot less. So if we ever do get to the point where we're getting those numbers, we need to make sure we're comparing apples to apples and not lumping everything together and comparing them with the same percentage.
Yes, and I would, to go along with that, every month we have grade level meetings, we have teacher lead meetings for professional development and just getting information out. We have those monthly that causes absenteeism in a normal year. This year we have restructured that completely to where our teachers are not leaving the building for that, and it's just within I shouldn't say just, it is delivered within their plan time versus taking large chunks to where we have to have substitutes for those days. We're not able to cover the amount of information that is needed to get out, but we are delivering it in a different way to help with that absentee rate so that we can utilize all subs just for sicknesses and people taking leave. So every conference that we've been attending has either been virtual, but I have not had the requests this year to even attend professional development from staff because they know they can't do this and leave the building. It causes stress for finding those substitutes. So our actual rate of requests for professional development has drastically reduced as well. Plus, we're not sending teachers out of the building for professional development within our own district. All of those have been restructured and are delivering within our instructional day without subs.
I would
Andy?
just, oh, I would just add on.
No, I was just, go ahead, Holly.
Yep, I would just add on to what Shannon said, that we have restructured all of our PD. So it is occurring during teacher plan time or at other times. We have not pulled the typical subs that we would to provide training for our staffs. And our teachers have been very gracious in working with us and asking questions and helping identify topics that are most important so that their instruction can continue to grow in ways that they need. In an average year, if we look at last year, we would have anywhere from about 15 on a good day to about 35 or so subs that would be needed just to cover teacher PD, either within our district or without on the outside of our district. So just as Shannon was saying, our staff has really collectively said, you know, we are making less requests and finding other avenues or using our own time and researching those sorts of things so that they can continue their professional development because they see the strain on the subpool. And as our principals have alluded to, they don't want to burden their colleagues or not be there for their students.
Justin.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to just address everybody again. I mean, the changes you all have made. I mean, the you know, sacrificing professional development and all the changes you have made to actually have a higher present percentage than last year. I think that's big. I mean, I think we all understand that, and not just schools, but across the board, whatever business you're in, everybody's making changes and adapting and adjusting schedules. But the fact that our attendance with staff is actually higher, I think that's kudos to the staff and district for managing this. There are a couple schools where we're seeing it and there's higher cases, and I think those schools definitely need to be addressed. So again, I want to thank the staff for what they've done to keep people there and the sacrifices they made along the way to keep our attendance where it is.
Okay. I'm not seeing any other, oh, Pam, go ahead. Sorry.
Becky, can you clarify for me what the role of the para will be in a completely remote environment?
Yep, and I'm going to rely, I know Shannon's one principal who has done this. We've worked closely together to get that in place. I know they were also working with that at Cooper Elementary prior to them going remote because they were experiencing some staffing concerns over there as well. But my understanding is that the paras are in the classroom, supervising the students, walking, you know, from student to student, helping with any kind of technology problems, helping with, our paras are not allowed to present new information, you know, new teaching or present new concepts, but they would be there to solidify those. If a student had a question that wasn't answered by the teacher that was zooming in or whatnot, that's how I see that person in the classroom. Shannon, do you have anything to elaborate on that?
Hey, Becky, real
really
quick.
I'm sorry.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not really
Yeah, go ahead,
talking
Pam.
about the classroom. I'm talking about if everybody's remote.
Oh, I gotcha. Sure. If everybody's remote, I know that Mr. Shipley's been doing this already with a lot of his classified staff, and we do have plans in place to ensure that all of our classified staff have work to do and are being paid in a remote learning model. We worked on that earlier. It feels like last week. It was earlier this week. With the gating committee's decision, we worked on that and communicated out with our classified staff. But many of them will be zooming in with the remote classes and providing some additional support, not only like with a large group Zoom, but also in smaller breakout rooms where they would be interacting with students. We will also have them doing check-ins and some of those smaller group one-to-one type check-ins. Again, not new instruction. They're not presenting new material or teaching new concepts, but they can be there to solidify concepts that have already been introduced by the teacher and do drills and practice and those repetition pieces. We will have also some of our classified staff working to prepare learning kits and technology and things for porch drop-offs for our students and things like that. But Mr. Shipley or Ms. Damel, do you have comments to add about how you're utilizing your classified staff in the remote learning model?
Sure. Go ahead, Clint.
They attend the Zoom just like the teacher does, and then we utilize breakout rooms, or they message. They have groups of kids like in Google Hangouts. They'll message them and check in, see how are they doing. Do they have questions? So they're reaching out individually to the kids, kind of on the side, much like they would in classroom. It's really just a virtual version of what we've been doing.
Okay.
Ours would be much the same. A lot of our paras work with our pre-intervention teams, where we identify students that are maybe struggling with certain concepts and we push them into the classroom to work on various things that teachers and our PIT team have put together that we need to deliver to students. For example, if it's a kindergarten student who's struggling with letter identification, they would push into a breakout room to continue that intervention that we have been providing.
And this model is very much outlined and designed by our task force committee with the Ready to Learn plan. So I know Dr. Putnam Jackson and then all of those teachers and other stakeholders who were serving on that Ready to Learn task force outlined all of these expectations and these plans to ensure that our kids had the support they needed and that our employees had meaningful work to do. So all of that has been worked through and thought through in that way.
Okay, thank you.
Do you think it's very important to note for both the board and for people viewing that the remote environment that families will see is different because of working through with Return to Learn committee and what our staff have done to prepare students than what people saw in the spring. So I'll say that again, it will be different than that, and the expectations would be different than that. And I would ask that Dr. Putnam touch upon that to know that what is different about that and what people can expect going into such environment.
Absolutely. So with the Return to Learn committee and with the KSDE guidance that we received late summer, the remote instruction has been revised so that it is both more rigorous and allows for more student support, which is very important in an online environment because it allows you to catch students where they may not be understanding and to provide them with additional help. The instructional times mirror what happens in a typical school day for our students, and we have built-ins because we do not want them spending the entire day in front of the computer. Segments of time where they are receiving instruction from their teacher, as well as engaging with their peers in online interaction. And then the learning facilitator time, which is there for the second part of that instructional block, whether it's a high school course, middle school mathematics, or elementary reading or math, are meant for teacher facilitation time. So during that time, the teacher is available to support small groups of students, to meet with individual students to do assignment clarification or to help build their skills, and or to support our students who are partnering with us to support our parents who are partnering with us to support our students. We have not only kind of made sure that it mirrors the typical school day, that we have built in supports for students, but our staff has made sure that since the beginning of the year, given our experience last spring, that they are ready and familiar with all of the tools and that our teachers and staff have the technology that they needed. So we've added document cameras, monitors, microphones, and full-on cameras in some instances so that the instruction provided remote can be as interactive as possible and also as closely as possible align with what our students would receive in the classroom. We also have added just this year in the fall remote tutoring and clubs for our students to continue to engage them in multiple ways and to make a system so that they can request additional support whenever they need it. So both our reading specialists, our paras, our classroom teachers, everyone, our special ed team has a support to play in making sure when we're in remote instruction that we're working together to provide our students with the support that they need. It does increase in rigor based upon what people have experienced last spring. And again, it does mirror more of a full school day. Any questions about that?
Okay, thank you. Are there any questions for Holly? I know Matthew had a question for a little bit ago.
Yeah, and not for Holly.
Go
I
ahead.
wanted to,
Go ahead. Oh,
I
and
noticed
Mark,
I do have one question for Holly.
Okay, go ahead.
I know as we've moved forward this school year, we've tried to prepare as best we can for a remote only district wide and with equipment and like some of the things you were just talking about. What have we done to reduce the shared workload in the schools for in-person since we started school? What, for instance, we've maybe reduced certain classes that we would offer in a normal school year, and now we've pulled back some of the activities that we've maybe pulled back on to free up more of the teaching resources to address more of our core classes. Can you speak to that a little bit for this school year so far?
So if I'm understanding your question correctly, I want to make sure that I'm getting you the information that you're requesting. You're asking if our in-person, what we've reduced as far as what we're offering in person so that we have the bandwidth to support remote instruction, or vice versa.
Just know that we have a limited resource, obviously, and then there's the expectations of a normal school year without COVID is this much workload as a district. And then have we pulled back on some of that workload because we have limited teaching resources for in-person only? I'm not addressing remote.
Mm-hmm. Now, for our in-person only, we've been very conscientious about how we use our resources, so we have not had to make lots of cutbacks to in-person instruction. We've done everything from working with our high school team to realign our high school schedule. Kids still get the same number of courses, they still get their choice of courses, but they get them delivered for a quarter instead of the typical 8 that they may get. We have worked to make sure that we are accommodating families' requests for remote instruction and trying to balance our class sizes with our in-person class so that our teaching for our in-person students remains as consistent as can be. So I'm not sure that we have had to do lots of foregoing of in-person things to accommodate remote instruction.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Matthew, go ahead.
Okay, so I think Joel had something to tie into this, and then I want to move on to ask the doctor a question.
Well, and really, I was just going to provide, again, a pretty individual example about how my classified staff would be working in a remote setting. And so my paras typically work either in my room with me, or they work in a teacher's classroom. And so we've created a schedule for them where they will join the class Zooms for the students that they support in classrooms. We'll utilize breakout rooms and kind of just one resource room Zoom so we can move and work and support students in their individual needs that way. And then we'll also be available to them during assigned learning facilitation times, basically using that as an open Zoom. So if, I have a second grader who has gone through their reading inclusion time and it's followed up by a learning facilitation time, they'll be able to hop on over to my classroom, hook up with that para, and continue that work. So again, it was just wanted to just provide a kind of a unique teacher perspective on how I'm planning on scheduling certified and classified during that time. Thank you.
So I had a question. I know one of the doctors is on the line. I wanted to hear their recommendations on where things are going and how the gating community came up with this decision. If they wouldn't mind providing that, it'd be appreciated.
Sure, this is Dr. Marty Turner. Basically what we were looking at, was all the information that's out there. The numbers have spiked greatly over the past couple of weeks. The in-person for the kids has actually been, fairly stable, but the worst thing that we were seeing was staff. And that was concerning to us, as doctors and on the gating committee. You have to have, I even said, and I'm one of the biggest proponents of having kids in school, but because that's the safest place for the kids, but that's not always the safest place for the teachers. And you have to have teachers to teach the kids. And if you don't have teachers, then it's not a safe place for kids because then they're running around without any supervision. But because of that, I mean, the other issue that we're looking at is here with Thanksgiving and Christmas. Unfortunately, in my opinion, as a society, we have let our kids down because we have not done our jobs at stopping this virus yet. We could have washed our hands and worn our masks and social distance, but I know a lot of people just driving around in my community yesterday, seeing how many families had, you know, Thanksgiving dinners together. That's where the biggest spread is. But unfortunately, when it spreads in the community, it seeps into the schools. And, you know, so yes, we're very correct that it's not a lot of spread in the schools, but it's coming into the schools. And now that it's in there, you know, that's why, you know, our recommendations were to go remote at the time was because the numbers have spiked. And hopefully within the next month, if we all do our jobs as parents and as adults and, you know, socially distance and try to get this virus under control, hopefully this vaccine, there's 2 or 3 of them that are coming out, will hopefully be able to start. You know, the president said hopefully next week we'll get the first doses out. I mean, realistically, it's going to be March or April before it's out into the community where we have, you know, widespread vaccination. So the light is at the end of the tunnel, but, you know, the numbers right now are pretty dark. The hospitals are full. All of my colleagues at the hospitals are exhausted. They're working their tails off, you know, taking care of people. The other issue that we had, you know, I came before the board and said, hey, you know, I think kids should be in school, and I still think that. But the next day, the numbers changed. This week, I wrote the note the same as one of the patrons said about what Dr. Redford said about having kids in school. And an hour later, Dr. Min said, hey, it's not as safe as what we thought it was. And so for right now, as good citizens of the community, we should all take it, you know, stay home, be remote, and try to do what we can to get this under control. We had done a great job up until now, but unfortunately, this virus is winning the current battle, but we will win the war. But right now, I think we just need to reset everything and get started on it.
Appreciate that. Thank you.
Sure.
Hey, Justin. Can I ask
Yes.
Dr. Turner?
Yeah. Go ahead.
Dr. Turner, thanks for being on again this morning, as well as Wednesday morning. Appreciate all your time and feedback. One of the things that you had talked about is the recommendation from the county. That seemed like that kind of changed your mind from what you provided us on Monday. You know, you did talk about the CDC director and his comments that were talked about earlier. And Dr. Alvarado actually also said continue with remote learning model for secondary students and continue with elementary in person. So do you think kind of the key is the Sedgwick County's recommendation that kind of flipped for both of you from what you provided us on Monday to now? Because also you had mentioned that COVID cases in your office had reduced significantly as of Monday. And again, that could have changed between Monday and today as quickly as things are moving. So wanted to ask you about that.
Sure. The numbers had significantly reduced in terms of not having 50 phone calls, but we're still getting, you know, 10 to 20. So, I mean, it's still out there. There's still people getting sick. The other problem with this virus is it's very unpredictable, and it's keeping people sick for 2 to 3 weeks, some people a couple of months. So the flu, you know, 5 to 7 days, you're sick as a dog, and then you get over it and you're back at it. This one here is so variable. In terms of the health order, yes, that definitely flipped our decision. We were on the border. You know, I think this whole time we've been on the border and really pushing the envelope at keeping kids in elementary. Because if you really looked at the numbers, it could have gone either way. And so I appreciate what the board did as a parent saying, hey, let's keep these kids in school as long as we can. But now that our health experts who know much more about public health than I do, you know, are saying, hey, we really need to buckle down and go remote. That's why I personally changed, you know, my opinion. The dad in me says, hey, keep those kids in school. But the doctor in me says, you know, the numbers tell us differently, especially that one slide that Becky showed that the numbers were spiking again. You know, the numbers are what we have to go on and not emotions. And the numbers have just gone crazy the past couple of weeks. And I think here at Thanksgiving, it's going to go up the next couple of weeks again.
Thank you.
Okay. Let's see. Were there any more questions on the staffing part of this? I'm not seeing any. Nikki, can you please give us just a quick update on how the students are looking with cases and that kind of thing?
Sure. So I kind of have a chart too that we keep, that we present at the gating committee. So I'll share that just so everyone has it in front of them. Let me do this the right way, hopefully. Okay, can you see this screen with the numbers on it? Yes. Okay, perfect. So this top one is just a week by week. This is what's presented on our dashboard on our website, and it shows the number of positive students. It doesn't show the number of quarantine, but there's our number of quarantine every Friday. So you can see here the last couple of weeks, we have definitely increased in our students. This November 23rd through, this was the gating committee, so I did not update these numbers. This is what was presented on Wednesday morning. We do have 4 more student cases, and again, they are not reflected on this document. I wanted to keep it the same as what was presented. And then I've also was asked to gather information based on every 2 weeks that the gating committee is meeting. So you can see over the 2 weeks when we meet on a Wednesday to a Wednesday, what those numbers looked like. So again, the last gating committee that we had 30 positive students over those 2 weeks. And when we met on Wednesday, we were now at 41. I also have them down here in a little line graph. This chart is a little misleading just because it has the 11 on there from the last 2 days. So that's why it kind of shows that it's going down. Here is our chart from the gating committee meetings in between the 2 of them. So you can see that that line is clearly increasing. Someone asked earlier on our total number of cases that we have had student-wise, and I think our running total right now is 123.
Can I support Nikki in that piece?
Yeah, go ahead.
I did get data from the health department at around 5 p.m. on Wednesday, and he had reflected, 5 p.m. on, Wednesday. He reflected that Derby schools, according to the health department records, had 199 cases and 130 were students. And so we're really close to those health department numbers, and that's anybody who identifies with Derby Public Schools when they're questioned by the health department. And so that's where we get those numbers. I will also say that 56 of the cases that Lacey, my aide, and I have worked occurred in the past 14 days at the end of the 25th. And so 28% of the cases we did see in just the past 2 weeks. And so it does support what Mr. Turner had stated about how the numbers are, increasing.
Okay, thank you. Real quick, let's see here. So how many do we have currently? I missed the beginning of that chart that are currently positive students that are out right now.
So for these last 2 days, so since Monday that we have worked on, we have 11 on our chart. We have 4 that are not reflected on the chart because again, I was keeping it the same. So those 4 will be reflected for next week.
So is that 15 the total number that are currently out, or are there other ones that are out there still recovering during their time, or is that the total out?
That'll be the total. That's not the total out. That's just the new cases that we have this week. There are still some at home recovering. Like Becky had said earlier, those dates are so fluid that once they test positive, the health department gives them a date. It's anywhere from 5 to 10 days later, they get to come back to school.
And does anyone track their recoveries, return? I know it's like you said, it's so fluid, but as kids come back, I mean, we've had 123 student cases, and I would assume, 100, the majority of those are back. We haven't had any long-term, they had to stay out or anything, right?
As far as we know, we have not had any students who have had long-term out other than the typical.
And then on the staff side as well, I guess that would be more Becky. According to so as of Wednesday, it looks like we had 69 staff. I mean, that from the health department numbers, and we have 79 from our numbers. That's the total cases since we started counting. Is that correct, Becky? I mean, since the beginning of the year, I would imagine.
Yes, that's correct. Since August 31st
Okay.
is what my chart reflects. August 31st through today.
Okay.
The 25th, actually. But I did count that case that came in today. So yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, that's fine. I'm just writing down this. Okay. All right. Well, I'll hold some of my comments. Did anybody have any comments for Nikki before I continue?
I think something just a bit anecdotally that is really important to mention is just the number of people that are trying to get tested and that have symptoms and that are out there and that can't get test results. I'm a personal representation of that has had it rolling through my family and have had to fight for my 1-year-old who's had multiple exposures and can't get tested because it's so in demand right now. So it's out there more than I think even the numbers are showing. So just a bit of an anecdotal, but I think it's important to mention.
Okay. Tina, go ahead.
Nikki, on the quarantined, if I read that correctly, it was, I think the number was 200. Is that correct on the amount of students quarantined?
Yes, that was as of Wednesday, and that's not new students. That is on Wednesday how many students we have out on quarantine.
Okay. Can you explain, and maybe it's not for you, maybe it's more for Dr. Putnam Jackson. Can you explain what happens to these quarantined students as far as how they receive their education? How are they receiving their lessons? I know it's different from elementary to high school and middle school. So could we touch on how these quarantine students are currently receiving their lessons and what's going on with that?
Yeah, so our quarantine students have access to their assignments through their teacher in their online platform at all of the levels. At secondary, the online learning management system is Canvas. At elementary, it is Google. At our high school level, our teachers are teaching synchronously. And so the students would get on Zoom and watch their lesson and complete their assignments from the Canvas learning management system, just as they typically would. A similar thing happens in middle school, except for that since we are not teaching synchronously, instead students would either be invited to join a remote section of their course, or more frequently they would meet with the team a couple of times a week so that they could be checked in upon. But they would be working and completing their same assignments that they had in Canvas or one of their online platforms, such as our Pearson learning system. In elementary, it looks very different because we have our teachers that are still teaching within their classrooms. In most instances, our students were referred to an AmeriCorps tutor who checked in on them, provided online Zooms a couple of times a day, not for every subject, but for reading and math, and then a social emotional check-in, and then also scheduled individual meetings in small groups, especially based upon requests for assignment help or when students needed additional assistance.
So in the high school, I understand since they're teaching synchronously, they can go on and have live teaching. But in the middle schools and the elementary schools, they are not getting that live teaching currently if they are quarantined, correct?
That is correct.
I can speak to just a little bit of what that looks like at the elementary level, having kids in quarantine. It is not their teacher, it's independent learning. There has been some great, I think, improvements made in quarantine learning. They have worked really hard to get AmeriCorps tutors in, so they have started getting interaction each day and connection and support, but it is with strangers and it's not necessarily tied to their schoolwork. So they have help if they're there to ask, but I would say that it is a bit more independent. So it is it's something, and it's better than being on your own. But
Shannon, go ahead.
Sure, I can add another perspective to that is because elementary is not synchronous, I have many teachers who are going above and beyond. I mean, my 5th grade was down to 3 students in a classroom. And so each of those 5th grade teachers pre-recorded their lesson and delivered it through their Google Classroom and Seesaw so that students would still have instruction from their actual teacher to be able to complete their assignments. But unless teachers are doing that, which we are not forcing due to the memorandum of understanding from the beginning of the year, we're not requiring that. My teachers are just doing that because 95% of their students were at home and only 3 in the classroom. So unless they are pre-recording, they're pushing assignments that they would normally have if they were in person present through their Google Classrooms and Seesaw. And students are doing those based on that. But a lot of teachers are doing the pre-recorded lessons and pushing out so that students can at least see their teacher presenting that new material, because the AmeriCorps person is not able to present new material to them.
Okay, I guess my point would be that they are currently, if they're quarantined and we have 200 students who are, they are not receiving any kind of live lesson from their actual teacher. It is pre-recorded, it is independent work, you know, and that to me is just not, I don't see how there's a lot of benefit in that. So I'll leave it at that for now. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Tina. Matthew, did you have a comment?
Yeah, just to add on to what Tina's saying, if we were going with this going remote, it's going to be as close as we can get to being in the classroom. Everybody's going to be live. Students have to be there. Assignments are being headed out. We said something earlier about that. There's different criteria than it was last spring. Kids have to participate, whereas the independent learning that leaves some gaps. So I would be very much in favor of sticking with what the gating committee recommended.
Okay, thank you, Matthew. I have a couple of things I'd like to say as well. Was there any other, I don't want to miss anybody, any other board members had comments? I'll flip through the screens here. Sorry. Oh, Mark, go ahead.
Yeah, hey, it's Mark. I 100% appreciate what's going on with our staff. It's a lot to ask. I have my own personal experiences with family, with friends, coworkers. We're watching this, I think, not just with the education system. It's in businesses, corporations. What I'm not hearing right now, though, is that there's a very large part of our community and parents that are saying that the remote model for their situation is not going to work for several reasons. Not to mention what other experts say about being isolated as young children, what that brings with for a long time or extended amount of time. From the beginning, I didn't think that we should ever go where our whole school district shut down unless it was very extreme. And I don't believe personally that we've reached this situation where we're extreme. I know we're saying, well, we can just do this for 3 weeks, get to the break, and then move forward from there. But what happens if, again, it's in January or February? The whole school year could be like this. And to go remote only, especially at the elementary age, is, I think, it's still a lot. It would have to be a lot more extreme for me to support that, because this whole school year could be a failure for a lot of families, a lot of children's education, but it also these other things that are happening with depression, isolation,
social skills aren't being developed. We have families that aren't going to be able to work. That economic impact will last longer than 3 weeks. I know this personally from where I'm working at and what happens when we go remote. I've heard dozens of parents say they can't work now. And so I do understand that we are straining our staff, and the solution for me is to pull back on some of the school year expectations, reduce the workload where we can. I've heard that we haven't really probably considered a lot of that, and try to. There's 2 reasons why I've heard from our district employees that we are there's a health risk. Well, right now, I don't think it's so extreme that our school district should shut down, and I do think there is a health risk, yes. And we've heard from medical professionals that there is a high amount of risk, and we've heard other medical professionals say there's not. And so my personal situation right now where I work, we're going through the same thing, and but we're not shutting down. We can't. We have to decide what we can do, and that's how to be safer, how to be more structured with washing hands, wearing masks, those types of things, the things that we can do. But for me, shutting down the school district, especially at the elementary age, we haven't gotten that far, and I would not support that. That's all.
Okay. Thanks, Mark. I'm going to go ahead and say a few things, and then I do have a motion I'd like to make at the end of that. First off,
Justin Robin had her hand up.
Oh, she did. Sorry, I didn't see. I got to flip through the screens. I'm looking. Hold on.
Okay.
Okay, Robin, you go, and then looks like I make sure I miss anybody else here.
Andy.
Andy. Yep.
And Pam.
Okay, go ahead. Yep.
Probably everybody.
Right.
Go ahead, Robin.
Okay, thank you. I was just going to say that, I'm on that gating committee. And so each week I've watched the gauge go from green to yellow to orange to red. I've been involved in all of those conversations, and I appreciate all of the input that is taking place from that gating committee. I also have been at the Chew and Chats. I was at Cooper last month, and then I was at Tanglewood this month, listening to the teachers and, just having that conversation and being in the buildings and hearing what's going on in the buildings. And I feel like, hearing all of that and just being part of that whole picture, I would definitely lean toward supporting, and continuing on with the same decision that the committee has made, because they've got that background and they've got the expertise that came into it. And, I really support that committee's decision. We have met as long as 3.5 hours at times. Yes, or Wednesday, I guess it was a pretty long meeting as well. And there is not one person on that committee that thinks in-person learning isn't important. Every person on that committee wants kids to be in person, but we have to weigh, the benefits. So I would definitely support the committee decision. Thank you.
Thank you, Robin. Okay, Andy, and then I think Pam had a comment.
Yeah, first of all, I want to just personally thank the staff. From what I've seen and what we talked about, the staff has been incredible in responding, have adapted, and it's been a team effort. I mean, talk about all the strings that people have pulled to make things happen. It's been awesome. From administration to principals, you guys are adapting every day. So thank you for that. I have also been a part of the gating committee, had the opportunity to serve on that. Appreciate the board allowing me to do that. And so want to thank the gating committee for everybody's time. We've got 25 people on that committee, and appreciate their time. We've talked about some of the facts so far. I'm not going to hit all of them, but I did want to review kind of where we're at just to provide big picture, especially again, from my perspective on the gating committee. So far through the year, we've had, I think it's 79 cases of staff now, which is about 6.5% of our staff population. 46 cases of the 78 did happen in November. So there's no denying there's more cases that have happened in November. I appreciate that and understand that fact. With students, we've had 123 cases, about 1.7 1.78% of our population. November, there were 67 cases of the 123, which is about 1% of our student population. So again, both populations, November has increased quite a bit. Sedgwick County, number of cases have gone from about 13,100 to 22,200 in November. And the positive test percentage has increased from 15 to 23% over that time frame. Again, facts that are on the Sedgwick County's website. However, the last week, the positive percentage is trending down and is at 21%. So that's a good thing, a little bit of optimism with that. Student absenteeism, Derby Hills and Derby High School both had absenteeism similar to last year and were green when we graded them out in our committee. Other than Cooper, which had over a 10% increase in absenteeism over the previous year, all other schools graded out yellow for absenteeism. We also looked at if you include quarantined students, Cooper and Derby Middle were in red, Derby North, Tanglewood, Oaklawn, and El Paso were in orange, and the rest of the schools were in yellow. So I think we've talked about the schools that we've really had, again, that have flashed warning signals, and I feel like we made the adjustments for those and would be prepared to make adjustments for those particular schools. As I pointed out, in absenteeism with staff, Tanglewood was at 84%, Oaklawn 88%. This is, again, the last 2 weeks. The other schools were actually very close to what they were last year, if not higher. So again, this is just data that we were provided. We didn't talk about this much on Wednesday, but our actual percent present and staff is higher. And I understand there's been some changes that have been made to accommodate for that. And staff have done awesome in making those changes. So again, I commend the staff. Staff quarantine, we talked about that. That's up as well, but it's down from the previous week of 74. Student quarantine has been as high as 402 when we first started, and then reached a high in November of 383, but that is down to 256 last week and 200 as of this week. And I, again, wanted to point that out. Also talked about, again, just want to provide facts for everybody and background as to what I'm thinking too. Input from our doctors as of Monday, like I said, they provided statements that supported being in person with elementary schools, and even talked about the CDC director's response, as was pointed out earlier. And then also, as of Tuesday afternoon, to the gating committee, our administration actually supported having elementary schools in person, and that did not change until the county health department's press release came out at about 3 p.m. that day. So our administration was supporting in person for elementary as of right before the Sedgwick County's order. So I wanted to talk about the order, what that actually means, because there's been a lot of reference to that. We placed a lot of weight behind it, and we should, if it's actually in the order. So I really want to understand that as well. The health order did include specifics about school. I think Mrs. Bohati pointed that out. Schools, colleges, universities should utilize remote learning as much as possible. And again, this seemed to change kind of everybody's viewpoint, administration and doctors, at least for our gating committee. So what I did, and I wanted to try to find out more information about what Sedgwick County meant, I inquired with the Health Department Director, Adrian Byrne, to understand what the statement meant. She said, this is what she said: it was not part of the order because it is a recommendation. We know there are a few cut and dry decisions. Most have consequences either way, in person or remote, and more than one factor needs to be considered. Then I asked, how we should handle it, because it is kind of vague. What does a school district do with this information? It's very tough for us to know what to do, if this is medical advice. And she said this is a decision for the Derby Board of Education superintendent to make. Governor Kelly has not closed schools. It's a decision districts are making based on the spread of COVID in the community, school, and availability of the staff. So I also inquired, what studies were used to make kind of that general comment, because if there are studies, that were used, some data that pointed out that schools contribute significantly to the community spread, I wanted to know that, or if there's studies even on data from schools in our area what data is there to point to that? And so she said that they do not have any studies given the amount of data since August. So one study that, one article that I actually sent to her, and it quotes a couple different studies, and I actually provided this to the gating committee, was an article that the Kansas Association of School Boards actually sent out. They're a resource that we use as school boards. I'm not advocating one way or another, but they pointed out this article that was put out by NPR from October 21st. And again, I provided this information at the gating committee, but it talks about a few international studies which talk about not only the negative impacts of being remote, but also the lack of data supporting that schools increase community spread. In this article, a pediatrician stated that she's seeing negative impacts of schools closing, mental health, hunger, obesity due to inactivity, missing routine medical care, the risks of child abuse on top of education. A study in Spain was actually in this article, found that students and staff who did test positive, 87% of them did not infect anyone else at the school. For the U.S., the Infectious Disease Society of America gave a briefing on safe school reopening, and infectious disease specialists described the data as not indicating that schools are a super spreader site. And as the article references, most clusters among young people in Spain have been traced to social gatherings as opposed to being in school. And then there's one thing that I think is important too, just when we talk about the risks, especially for elementary school age. There was a study from Yale University that tracked 57,000 child care workers located in all 50 states, in Washington, D.C., and Puerto Rico. The first 3 months of the pandemic is when this was tracked. About half continued caring for the young children, such as the children of essential workers, while the other half stayed at home. So half were, what we want to say, exposed to kids, and half were stayed at home. The study found there was no difference in the rate of coronavirus infections between the two groups, and this was 57,000 people, according to and after accounting for demographic factors. It stated children under the age of 10 generally are quite low risk of acquiring symptomatic disease from the coronavirus. This is Dr. Renu Kishul of Weill Cornell Medicine. He talks about they rarely transmit it either. He says it's a happy coincidence that the youngest children face the lower risk and are also the ones who have the hardest time with virtual learning. So in summary, as I noted previously, I greatly appreciate everybody's time, the grit that employees have taken on over these last few months. Like I've told many people, you're heroes in keeping us in school this long. And I think we should definitely continue that way, especially at the elementary level. So I thank you so much. As a school board, I think we've got to take data, feedback, input provided by all stakeholders. Our gating committee has some great people on it. The challenge we have, there's a lot of educators, administrators on there. We don't have a lot of community members and parents on there either. So while there were a lot of people that were in favor of doing what was suggested for the gating committee, I don't feel like it truly represented all of the stakeholders in that decision. Again, I appreciate everybody's comments and the information that was provided. So based on the feedback from the county, which states we can't make the decision locally based on what's best for our district, based on the feedback received from everybody and everything, I think we should continue with remote. We do have the ability, if schools flare up, that we can shut them down and go remote for a brief time. But I would definitely be an advocate for keeping the elementary schools in person like we planned these last few weeks. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Pam, go ahead.
Yeah, I agree with what everyone has said. It's a really tough decision. It's a decision that probably close to half of the community is going to be really upset with either way. So, obviously, like all of you, I've done a lot of thinking about this over the past couple of days. Reached out to some people for input to try to make the best decision that I possibly can. I will say that what has surprised me in the feedback I've received is the number of teachers who are in favor of staying in the classroom, which I think speaks volumes to the commitment of those instructors who would put the education of the kids before their own health. But ultimately, I feel like we created the gating criteria when we decided to return to school in the fall. We established criteria that we were going to use as our guidelines for keeping our staff and students as safe as possible. We've now reached the point where, you know, the tough decision has to be made. But I think in order to uphold the promise that we've made to our community to try to keep everyone as safe as possible, I would go with the to support the decision of the gating committee. I do have a few things I would like to ask, though, based on the feedback I received. Some of the instructors felt like if we do uphold the decision, if Monday could be used as a snow day to maybe give a day of transition and a little more time to prepare, that would be very helpful. I've also been asked if teachers can get hot spots. And then the third thing that I just would like to request is if maybe on our website we could have a page devoted to resources for family of students who are learning remotely. I know there are some accommodations in the CARES Act for that, and I briefly did some research yesterday, found a couple of other things too. So I mean, I think it would be helpful if we do uphold the decision, if we could provide as many resources as possible to help students and families deal with whatever the repercussions of that decision are. Thank you.
Thank you, Pam. Okay, so I also want to kind of echo most of the comments there that, you know, thanks everybody for getting up Friday morning on Thanksgiving holiday weekend to come together and discuss this. You know, I know it's probably not what everybody wanted to do, but as we've seen from the amount of, you know, comments we received and even people that woke up as well to come talk with us, that the public did want to provide comment. And it is good. I mean, it's important that we hear that. Those are the, as far as us board members, those are the public that put us where we are to make these kinds of decisions. So I think it's important that when these kind of, you know, decisions need to be made, that we listen to what our patrons have to say about it. You know, at least the general consensus of what we hear. And as you guys heard, and it's from what I'm hearing, you know, there's the consensus is that there's some very big concerns about what to do with remote, especially in the younger grades. It seems like most of our comments tonight or this morning were about just trying to keep kindergarteners, first grade, second graders on track and learning, and then with parents that both work, but they have to now figure out a way to make this work while at home for 3 full weeks. So it is going to be difficult for the community if that's the route we go. I understand, you know, the comments about staffing concerns. It seems like that's probably the big one that may be swayed some of the committee to go that route is concerns with staffing. And I agree, we did have concerns. We especially at Cooper, which we addressed, and we put Cooper remote as a school, but we didn't blanket it across the board because we have schools that just don't have the same concern. So it seems to be a little unfair to not offer the kids in-person learning where we can, which would be the majority of our schools. My question with staffing earlier is kind of still pertains. Even if we do go remote, the staffing concerns won't change a whole heck of a lot, because we're not going to ask remote teachers that have tested positive to teach. So while it's concerned now because we show these teachers out with positive cases and we got to find subs, we'll have to do the same thing when they're remote. So that seems to be, that could still be a concern that we got to address in person or remote. So I'm not necessarily overly concerned with that one, because I think it's going to remain. We did a couple board meetings ago. We voted as a board 7-0, I believe. Maybe it was 6-0. I can't remember if everybody was there. But we did vote that for the gating committee to put heavy emphasis on our district local numbers as opposed to county numbers and recommendations. So what we had happen though is we were doing that. Sounds like leading up to the committee, we were, even from the administration level and our doctors as well, heavily weighting their decision and their preference to stay in person on local data. Well, then we had a recommendation come out from the follow-on order from Dr. Menz, and that changed. And so I feel like that might be counterintuitive to what we actually asked the committee to do, which was look at our local numbers first as the majority of what they do to make their decision. So while I understand that committee is asked to do a whole heck of a lot, and it's a difficult place to be, we did ask that we continue to keep our district numbers as at the forefront as the main focus of our decisions. And I'm not sure if that was the case in this situation to move to full remote. We have, as everyone has heard numerous times now, I mean, we have the CDC director come out and say that schools need to remain open. Closing the schools now is just an emotional response to this pandemic, and kids are going to be safe in school. And looking at our numbers, and I did quick math here, and I think someone else did earlier, but 6% of our staff has had positive COVID since the school year started. 2% approximately of our students have been positive since the school year started. I'm not downplaying COVID because personally I've had it affected. I've had an aunt in the hospital on max oxygen from COVID, so it is a real deal. However, do we feel like we should close our schools down, push all of our young kids from ages 4 up to a remote learning environment because we have a 2% positive case among students, 6% positive among staff, not necessarily just teachers, when we will still have these issues in a remote setting? It's hard. And the thing is, I know this is it's easy. It's much easier for us to push remote. It will be the cleanest, the quickest way for us to go. Everyone goes home and we do it remote. But this year's not easy. It's never been easy. And the easy way probably is not going to be the right way in this situation. When I see the posts or the signs where everybody's essential workers, ones that I think about would be our teachers. So our teachers, I feel like and if we asked them a year ago, we would say teachers definitely, they're essential. They just like we can't ask the doctors and to go home and work from home for the most part. If teachers are able, and we did give the option on numerous times if they wanted to work remote or in person, and it sounds like the ones that chose in person wanted to be in person. I don't know if we forced anyone to go in person. I hope not, but that I don't know. But I would look at those are essential workers for an essential service, and our main goal as a district is to educate these students. And I know we'll try our hardest in a remote setting. But I think it's going to, as you've seen from numerous comments and statements, it's going to be an incredibly difficult task at the lower levels. Middle school and high school, I still think it's difficult there. But I think in elementary, trying to put them on a computer for the majority of a day is just going to prove to put our kids even further behind. And I think, like Mr. Tillison said earlier, this is just for 3 weeks. But then when we come back in January, and we decide, well, we're not quite ready with the vaccine, let's push it until March. Well, these kids are missing over half to almost the full year of in-person instruction. We're going to fall so far behind the educational curve by the time this is over that these kids are going to spend a whole next year getting caught up with the same grade level that they're in, and we just can't afford that. And not alone, let alone the emotional, mental health of all the kids involved. We've had kids in our district that are having and we've heard from parents of kids that are having very negative thoughts about harming their own selves, and these are young kids. We can't have that. So while I agree that remote is there, I mean, and if it's needed, we utilize it. We have, like I said, at Cooper, middle and high, and North Middle School. I just don't think the numbers that add up. I mean, everyone is saying, look at the data. Well, that's exactly what I think we need to do, is look at this data, and the data there. And when we say data, we're looking at the numbers, and the numbers all everyone agreed that we should stay in person until a recommendation came out to use remote as much as possible. That is what changed our minds. It wasn't necessarily the data. That is what changed the committee's minds, is that there's a line came from Dr. Menz to use. So I think it's unfair to our kids. These kids need to be in person for a variety of reasons, but I can't sit here and repeat them all. We've talked about it enough. But with that being said, I'm going to make a motion, and I'm going to ask if anyone does vote. I need people to keep their hands so I can flip through all the screens and see. but it's gonna be, well, depending on how the first motion goes, it might be multi-parts, but the
Hey,
first motion.
Justin, Tina
Go
has
ahead.
her hand up.
Oh, I can't see her. Sorry, Tina. Where are you at? Let me look for you. Go ahead.
Before you make that motion, can I have my time to say something?
Yep, go ahead.
First of all, I think I don't know that I don't want to say it's a fallacy, but I don't know that it's fair to the gating community that you're saying that we made our decision, flipped our decision on the order. I'm on that gating committee, and that is not what flipped my decision. What flipped my decision is the amount of students and the amount of staff that are being put home for contact tracing, quarantined, or being tested positive. The fact you can look at the numbers. Yes, you can weed it out any way you want to 1%, 2%. But the fact is that we had an increase from the previous week of 21 staff that tested positive for COVID. Okay, and now we're looking at another 15 students at the elementary level who are positive for COVID. That doesn't even include the contact tracing, because these are such new cases that you can't get to the contact trace because of the holidays. So for me, I don't think that's fair that you're saying that we flipped because of that. I did not flip because of that. I can't speak for anybody else on the committee, but that is not, I assure you, why I flipped. I looked at the data we were given, and just as much as you guys can research and just as much as everything, I do all my research too. Make no qualms about it. I received an email that said I am uneducated. I received an email that said I don't have any common sense. I assure you, I am a highly educated person, and I have so much common sense, it's ridiculous sometimes. You can ask my kids, my parents, whoever that knows me knows that I have more common sense than probably most people. So if I sound angry, I'm a little angry right now. I didn't appreciate getting emails from people saying that, I was not educated and didn't have any common sense. I appreciate emails. Email me all you want. Attack me, no. I will happily talk to anybody about this. I will happily sit down and have a discussion. But when you come at people and you start saying that they don't have any education because they made a decision based on numbers that we're getting that are increasing, and we're getting information from our doctor who is saying they're going worse. And we're putting as I said in the meeting, a pause on this, because I do believe that the worst part of this is going to be from now until the end of Christmas, when people want to be together and people need to be together. You guys are talking about mental health. You guys are talking, okay, people need to be together. It's the holidays. Nobody wants to be away from their family members. That creates and plays into the mental health just as much as anything else. For me, this is a pause, and that is how I choose to look at it. It is a pause. It is for 3 weeks. I would just as soon take this 3-week pause than to come back and say in March, like we did last year, the kids are done for the rest of the year. If we can mitigate these cases, if we can get our buildings clean again so that the virus is not on the surfaces, and then bring our staff back healthy, bring our staff from being quarantined, so that we're not in this situation in the spring of nobody's going to school, because none of us, I heard it at the gating committee, none of us want to cancel school. That is not at all what we want to do. So for me, it's a pause. For me, it is a pause to get our situation under control, to get it back to where we have healthy people. And not only that, but we have kids in quarantine now who are not getting any live teaching. They're being reliant on independent learning, and that's not healthy for them either. At leastways with them going to remote learning, they will have somebody live to help them and teach them. I do understand it's going to be a difficult thing for parents to navigate. And I do understand that a lot of people have the preconceived notion it is going to be like it was in the spring, and it is not. We have put a lot of different things in place. We have to trust our administration that we've hired to do their jobs and put it in place and put understanding that one kid may not work. But I also trust that our staff, our administration, our principals, our superintendent, our assistant superintendents are constantly looking at this and are constantly trying to do what is best for our kids. So I don't support not going gating community or gating credit said. Because I was on that committee, I looked at the information and I made my decision based on the numbers that we have for today, which is what we have done the entire time that we have been on this gating committee. That is what the board decided. We wanted the gating committee to put that in, and that's what. So.
Okay, thanks, Tina. No, I think the comments were more directed. It sounded like when we asked the questions of our medical team that they were on board with us staying in person, at least at elementary levels, up until Dr. Benz added his recommendation. So that's kind of where, and they're part of the gating committee as well. That provides big input. So that's kind of where I was talking about on that. But as far as emails, yeah, that is, I could see the frustration there for sure. Matthew, did you have a comment?
Yeah, I just wanted to echo what Tina was saying, and to tie in, Dr. Turner said, I really think this pause is going to be needed. If we do, and I want to reemphasize something he said earlier. I don't know if anybody caught it or not. We've kind of failed our community by not everybody following the standards that's been asked for, washing your hands, wearing the masks. Where if we do this, 3 weeks out, you get Christmas break in there, and everybody continues to do social distancing. I'm a firm believer that we'll see our local numbers go down low enough we could pull back, but we've got to do our part. I wasn't really going to share this earlier, but I even received some threatening emails, and it's nothing new. I mean, I'm old man on the board now. That's happened before, but the people that talked to us earlier about taking the emotion out of it, but then you see some of the emails they send, it's a little ridiculous. Again, I'm going to restate that I think the gating community is doing a fantastic job. Our staff's doing a great job. I can't thank them enough. Again, I want to thank them for working over the Thanksgiving holiday for this meeting, and that I am definitely in favor of continuing using the gating community and their recommendations.
Okay, thank you, Matthew. I guess one concern I'd maybe have about the pause would be, we did this, right? We've done this a couple of times before. We did it for the entire spring, not necessarily the learning, that was different, but we did pause to control this virus, and obviously that had no effect. We continue to have to do more and more and more. So at what point do we decide we've probably done as much as we can with this? So that's kind of what my thoughts would be on that as well. Let's see, I'm just flipping through the screens real fast, making sure no one's got a hand up. Okay, so is that a hand? No. Okay, with that being said, at least for just kind of based on what all we talked about, what was said before, for the elementary level grades K through 5, I would make a motion that we do bring them back in person and keep them on track as the way they were already going.
I'll second. That's Mark.
Okay, we do have a motion and a second. So all those in favor, if you are in favor, please keep your hand up so I can get a count. All those in favor. Or let's, real quick, before we do that, were there any more questions or comments? Okay, I don't hear any at least. All those in favor, please raise your hand. Okay, I got it. So that motion does fail to a vote of 3-4. And pending any other motions, which I don't think we need to have because we already are set to go remote, unless someone else has some last minute thing they want to add, we will.
So I do have a comment or a question for Heather. With Pam making some, now that we know that we're going to stay with the gating criteria, she made a couple recommendations she'd heard from staff on that day, that Monday. Do you need a motion from the board to pull that off, or is that something that you can do on your own, Heather? If it's decided that you were to give them a prep day.
So a couple things. One, schools are required 1,186 hours. I can give you, we did run numbers with where we're sitting. There is, we still do have a snow day be available, and then an extra if you want to say a 0.5 of a day. I will ask that Holly kind of talk about the preparation that individuals have had, because I think there's two things, and depending, we don't know too, we need to keep in mind, since really we have a half day kind of floating out there for this group's purposes. If you flip a student day and then they work, you would be using up that half day because you can count work time as half. So yes, there is a half day that could be flipped per what someone had talked about. However, that does leave you with nothing left if you keep that snow day in. And if there's any needs between now and the end of the school year to have some work time available. So I would ask that Holly kind of talk about where you feel we're at regarding that, and the prep regarding that.
And so we have worked with teachers, staff, and students to be as prepared as possible. Even since the beginning of the year, we have shared remote schedules. And as part of the Return to Learn plan, the committee requested that everyone have Google Classrooms and Canvas classrooms ready to go in the instance that we should need to go remote for instruction. We, with the last inclement weather day, recognized that we only had the one additional day, and we know that we live in Kansas. And so sometimes we get snow all the way through March and later in the calendar year. And so we know with just that one day that we wanted to ensure that we were meeting the state's requirements, the 1,116 hours. And that we were also safeguarding our teachers and students so that learning could continue if it needed to. So we asked our administrators to check in with teachers. We also shared with teachers at grade level meetings and other meetings that they needed to be ready to go remote and to have their instructional resources ready. And we also wanted to make sure, because we know when we went last spring, that it was hard for students to figure out without any kind of practice or training whatsoever to log on to Zoom for live instruction or to find their assignments and work in Google Classroom or Canvas. If it was not a course that heavily relied on either of those formats. And so we worked with teachers and had them practice with students so that they know how to do Zooms. They should know how to find their Google Classrooms as well as their Zoom classrooms. So we really worked in general to kind of set the expectation and provide people with training and time to be ready since the beginning of the year. And then as frequently as the last inclement weather day that we took, we also provided reminders for teachers to be prepared to go remote. At conferences, we asked that they share their remote schedules with families so that they also were prepared to go remote. And then we also have had teachers and students practicing logging on and finding materials during their regular instructional day.
Okay, I think that answers the question. We're not going to need anything else to do then. All right. Appreciate it.
Okay. With
I mean, as a
that,
board,
right.
got plenty of work to do.
Okay, so with that being said, I'm just making sure no one's got a hand up before we close. Okay, so I'll entertain a motion to adjourn this meeting.
Hang on. I saw a hand go up with Tina.
Oh, you did? Okay, hold on.
Just real quick, as far as making sure that the information gets out, I know we received an email that said that a lot of people didn't know when we went remote with the high school and the middle school, we still had people showing up at the buildings. How do we intend to handle that? at the elementary levels, and also what plans do we have going forward, making sure that it's communicated out, since it is a holiday weekend and people's mind not necessarily be on school, how we're going to do that. And yeah, I don't want any to be misinformed on anything that's going out to them as well.
And I can speak to that a little, at least elementary level. Sky alerts have gone out both via email, text message, and some have also done voice Sky alerts. And we've also asked each individual teacher to reach out to families of their students and re-deliver that remote schedule to each of the families so that they would have that information. So we're trying to hit it as many platforms as we have. It will also be on Facebook, Twitter, and so forth. But
okay, very good. I just want to make sure we had, and I know everybody had talked about it, so I was positive there was probably a plan in place, but just wanted to make sure and have it be public to the meeting so that whoever's watching can have that information as well. Thank you.
Justin, Becky has her hand up.
Okay, Becky, go ahead.
Thank you. I just wanted to add, there was also, I believe one of Pam's questions was about hotspots for teachers, and we will have hotspots available for our staff who need those to work remotely from home. So we just wanted to clarify that those would be available.
Okay, thank you, Becky.
May I ask one clarifying? Thanks. Will staff have the opportunity to work from school or home? I mean, will they have that choice, or will all staff be required to work from home? Has that been stated?
Sure, I can answer that. We worked together on some guidelines for that, and that has been shared out with our leadership team. At this point, I believe our teachers should have received that information also, but they will have the option to work remotely or to come into the building. We're highly encouraging people to work remotely whenever possible, as the recommendations, with keeping the community spread down, but they will be allowed to work from the building as well. Just as middle and high school has been in place, that's the way that it has been, but we are again encouraging people to work from home if they can.
Okay, thank you, Becky. All right, any other board members have a last minute question?
Mark's got his hand up.
Yeah.
Mark, go ahead.
Hey, and I dropped off somewhere. I lost about 10 or 15 minutes, and this may have come up. And if it did, I apologize. Can we get the statistics of our positive cases and our quarantined members of the school district broken down by each of our schools, each of the elementary schools? I'd like to know. We like Cooper. We had Cooper go remote only. I'd like to know, in comparison, the rest of the elementary schools, where they're at for positive cases and folks quarantined by each school. And I think that's something we should continue throughout the year. And then I also think, we talked earlier about some of the different, I'll call them stakeholders, I guess. It's parents, it's teachers, it's certainly our children in our school district. I'd like to reconsider the makeup of our gating community, or gating committee. I think it's heavily represented by teachers only. I would like to, and not today, but I would like to discuss at maybe our next board meeting to have a more representation by the community on that gating committee. That's all I have.
Thank you, Mark. Okay, let me see here. You see anybody else, Matthew?
No, you're clear. It's
all
clear.
right. Okay, so with that being said, thanks everybody again for coming out this morning and meeting with us to discuss this very important topic. I will entertain a motion to adjourn this meeting.
So moved.
So moved. Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor? Looks like motion passes 7-0. All right, thank you. Have a good day.
Thanks, everybody.